Magdalen College stands aloof at the edge of Oxford's dreaming spires, rising from the mist like a castle remembering its secrets. The river laps softly against its gardens. The cloisters echo with footsteps not always accounted for, and above it all, the bell tower watches in silence. Tourists admire its Gothic spires and ivy-choked stone, but students know better. They avoid the shadow beneath the tower. Not out of superstition, Oxford is full of that, but out of something colder, older, something closer to instinct. At the heart of this tale is a bell. Forged in 1441, according to a brief, half-burnt mention in a ledger held under glass in the Bodleian Library, it was cast not in celebration, but in warning. Its inscription was once clear, but now reads only in fragments. That which is, to sleep, shall toll. No record remains of who commissioned it. Only that it rang once, in 1555. The night before a fire gutted part of the chapel, and several fellows were found raving, clawing at the walls, one having torn out his own eyes. The bell tower was sealed, the mechanism destroyed. No one rang it again, until, some say, Thomas Averell did. Thomas was an unusually gifted student of divinity. He arrived in the autumn of 1996 with a scholarship, a leather suitcase, and an old Bible annotated in several languages. His rooms overlooked the college gardens. He was polite, soft-spoken, tidy. He read alone, walked alone, and seemed always slightly distracted, as if hearing something others did not. He was assigned to Dr. Hester Blackwell, a senior fellow in liturgical history. Known for her skepticism and sharp intellect, Blackwell quickly noted that Thomas wasn't simply bright, he was searching for something. Not knowledge, understanding. In Trinity term, he requested access to pre-Reformation texts held in restricted archives, books marked non-catalogued. He cited a proposed thesis on prelapsarian theology and the reconfiguration of original sound. The phrase troubled Blackwell. She let him proceed. It was her first mistake. Thomas began keeping strange hours. He stopped shaving. His fingers bore ink stains and chalk dust, and the skin beneath his nails was always dark, as if he'd been digging. The scouts complained of symbols drawn on his mirror. Circles within circles. Some scrawled backwards. In Latin, in Greek, and something unidentifiable. He requested to be excused from chapel. Not out of atheism, he claimed, but because the prayers weren't facing the right way. When asked to explain, he simply replied, "The bell knows." On the night of May 24th, under a windless sky, the bell rang. Once. Low, final. No one had access. No one should have been able to ring it. Windows cracked. Power surged. A stained glass panel in the chapel shattered from the inside out. And at precisely 12:44 a.m., the gate to the sealed belfry unlocked itself. Blackwell ran to the source, finding only silence. But there, at the threshold of the tower stairs, she found Thomas's notebook. It was open to a page filled edge to edge with the same sentence, over and over. Only the buried remember how to wake. She brought it back to her rooms, locked the door, and began to read. The notebook changed as she read it. The ink seemed to darken. Sentences bled into one another. There were passages that answered her thoughts, anticipating her questions, remembering things from her childhood, things she had never written down. One entry, dated 2 days in the future, read, "She will try to stop the ringing. She won't succeed." The last page was blank. Then, Under her gaze, letters began to form, handwriting not her own. It said, "Do you remember the hour you were born, Hester?" "I do." She dropped the notebook. Students began to fall ill. Nosebleeds. Insomnia. A girl from New College was found trying to dig beneath the Magdalen cloisters with a dessert spoon, mumbling about the mouth beneath the stone. Multiple students reported hearing a low, metallic humming when standing near the tower. One said it wasn't sound, but a thought broadcast just beneath hearing. You were not made. You were wrong. Thomas had vanished by then. His room was untouched, bed neatly made, books stacked alphabetically, his shoes left by the window. His journal remained on the desk, opened to the first page. The inscription read, "This book is not mine. It is the bell's." Dr. Blackwell was last seen on June 6th during prayers at the end of the day. She led the choir herself, her voice firm, her hands steady. No one noticed the bruise around her throat until the next morning. She never returned to her rooms. The porter found her black academic robes folded neatly on her chair. Beneath them, a tape cassette with no label. It contained a single sound. The bell slowed to near silence. And beneath that, faint and almost imperceptible, a second voice, whispering, repeating one name. Averill. The tower is closed again, resealed, but the lock is newer and the stone seems thinner. Some students in later years report hearing breathing near the belfry stairs. Those who study liturgy are warned not to read Thomas Averill's notes, though no one admits where they are stored. Still, if you walk past Magdalen at twilight, you might feel the pull. And if you stay too long and the air changes and the wind stops and everything is very, very quiet, you may hear something far above you in the sealed room stir. And remember, the bell does not call the dead. It calls the buried, and the buried are beginning to wake. Oxford always pretends nothing happened. The files on Thomas Averill were quietly closed. His name never made it into the alumni roll. Dr. Hester Blackwell was on sabbatical indefinitely. The bell, a superstition, a tale for freshers, like the college deer knowing when exams begin. But the silence was a lie, because something had changed. The tower no longer just loomed. It watched, and each June, when the light hangs strange in the evenings, someone dreams of the bell. It started with Naomi Verity, a postgrad in medieval musicology. She arrived in Oxford for a one-year placement, bright-eyed, careful, rational, a scholar of chants and cathedral acoustics. She didn't believe in ghosts until she began dreaming of a corridor that didn't exist, stone-lined, endless, with a bell tolling just once, always just ahead, never visible. The sound filled her with both awe and shame, a terrible certainty that she had forgotten something sacred. She brushed it off, until she found a piece of music in the old library, unlabeled, handwritten, and bound in oxblood leather. The notation was ancient, not Gregorian, older, angular marks too sharp to be sung. At the top, in faded ink, Cantus age voce mortuorum, which translates to song for the voice of the buried. She laughed. A joke, surely. Then she turned the page and found her own name written in the margin. Naomi began hearing whispers in old recordings she digitized. At first, background noise, then breath, then language. Your voice is tuned. You are a vessel. Sing, and the stone will open. She tried deleting the files. They returned. She stopped sleeping. Her vocal cords became strained without cause. Her dreams deepened until she stood not just near the bell, but beneath it. And Thomas Averill was waiting there. His face was half in shadow. His eyes were wrong, not glowing, not dead, listening, as if her mind were a hymn he had waited years to hear. He held a rope that vanished into darkness and said, "You've already heard it ring. You just haven't remembered." On the 24th of May, the anniversary of the first toll, Naomi vanished for 22 hours. She was found the next morning in the chapel, standing barefoot at the altar, mouth red from singing, hands covered in chalk. On the floor, traced perfectly, were the 7 concentric circles that had once been found in the tower. When asked what happened, she said, "I was inside the bell." Something followed Naomi back from the dream. People began to report seeing a figure in black robes walking the cloisters late at night, not unusual for Oxford. But those who saw him said his feet never touched the ground. One porter resigned after reviewing CCTV footage and finding a man standing in the sealed bell chamber at 3:33 a.m., visible only on infrared. A fellow in theology, overcome with dread after a dream of fire and stone, attempted to burn Naomi's discovered manuscript. The flames turned green. The manuscript remained intact, etched into its cover, newly visible, Custas Campani, the Bellkeeper. A phenomenon began to spread. Entire wings of the college would fall silent for minutes at a time. Footsteps made no echo. Birds would not sing near the tower. Phones would not ring. Even the chapel bells paused, without fault or signal. And during those silences, several students reported hearing the buried. A girl from St. Hilda's transferred after waking with a stone in her hand and dirt beneath her fingernails. She claimed the Bellkeeper had spoken to her. "There are voices beneath the city. We built over their mouths." Naomi left Oxford in the final week of Trinity term. Her final note, found on Blackwell's old desk, read, "There are 7 bells. Ours is the first. If it rings again, it will not be calling just one." Since then, a silence persists in Magdalen that feels like a held breath. The tower is monitored but never entered. The seal is replaced every year, no one knows by whom. And yet, each May, the same pattern begins again. A dreamer, a hum in the stone, a voice in an old recording, a name whispered from beneath. And somewhere, always unseen but increasingly close, the Bellkeeper waits. Because the bell does not toll randomly. It tolls when someone has remembered. It tolls when someone sings the right note. It tolls when the earth stirs and the past begins to wake. There are things older than Oxford, older than Christ Church's tower, older than Roman walls, older even than the pagan earthworks beneath Port Meadow. Naomi Verity believed the bell at Magdalen was one of a kind. She was wrong. Weeks after her disappearance, a package arrived at the Ashmolean Museum. No name, no return address. Inside, an oilskin scroll, sealed in wax and marked only with a circle of 7 lines. The scroll, when unrolled, was not paper, but treated skin, possibly calf, possibly human. Upon it, a hand-drawn map of Oxford, centuries out of date. But beneath each college, each chapel, each ancient garden, were precise black circles. 7 in total, each labelled in a dialect no one could quite place. Pre-Celtic, perhaps, or older still. A linguist from Balliol translated one phrase before going missing. The bells were bound, one for each gate. In the basement of an abandoned college building near St. John's, workmen uncovered a sealed chamber. There was no door, no staircase, only smooth stone and a depression in the center shaped like a bell's base. When one of the men stepped inside, he screamed once and fell silent. The others found him standing rigid, eyes rolled back, whispering, "It's not ringing. It's breathing." He never recovered speech. On his forearm appeared a mark over the next week, 7 concentric lines burned into the skin. The chamber was resealed. The site was accidentally omitted from all university maps. But the sound began anyway, at first only in dreams, then in cellars, then through the pipes of buildings that had no pipes. A low, subharmonic vibration, not quite audible, but undeniable. Students began dropping classes. Faculty called it hysteria. But in their sleep, they all heard the same phrase. One bell rings, another. Deep in the Bodleian's restricted stacks, a retired professor named Elias Corin discovered a reference in an exorcism manual from 1371. To silence the 7, bury the keys, not the keepers. Corin had seen Averell's files. He'd been one of Blackwell's colleagues. He returned to the sealed belfry at Magdalen with one goal, to destroy what lay within. But he never made it inside. The night before he planned to enter, he was found seated upright in his rooms, every bell on campus ringing simultaneously except the one in Magdalen. That one tolled once and stopped. His final note: "They are not calling out. They are calling to one another." It's now understood by a very quiet circle of scholars, those who haven't vanished, that each bell was placed to seal a gate, not to another world, but to a memory buried in the land itself. Something so old, so powerful, that it had to be split into 7 echoes, each bound in silence and stone. But now one is awake, and the rest are listening. Some suspect the others lie, beneath the Radcliffe camera, where books sometimes rearrange themselves into circles. Under the Isis River, which no longer freezes, but hums. Within the sealed crypt beneath All Souls, where 7 chairs are arranged around a missing center. And one, possibly, beneath the Bridge of Sighs, where a student jumped in 1864, whispering, "It's rung for me already. I must answer." There are new figures seen in Oxford now. Not just the Bellkeeper, though he appears more often, face still unseen, drifting between cloisters with hands folded and robes dragging soundlessly behind. But others, 7 of them, they walk apart but hum the same note. They are never caught on camera. They leave no footprints. But they are always seen watching from the corners of libraries, choir stalls, examination halls, a dissonant choir, the watchers of the next bell, but not the end of the tolling. Because in the hush between lectures, between heartbeats, between the tick and the tock of the Radcliffe clock, if you listen very carefully, when no one else is speaking, when your ears ring just slightly, you may hear it, that hum beneath the world, the breath of buried bells, the memory of something older than time, waiting to be rung again. Oxford is not a city. It is a labyrinth, walled with time, sealed with memory, and lined with mirrors that lie. By now, 4 bells have whispered, 3 remain sealed, and in the space between them, something begins to stir. It begins with mirrors. Across Oxford, seemingly at random, glass begins to break. Bathroom mirrors in St. Hugh's, The window of the library at Corpus Christi. A skylight during evensong. No noise, no pressure, no impact. They simply split, silently, into radial fractures, circles within circles. One physics student attempted to film the shatter pattern in slow motion. When he slowed the footage to 1/10,000th speed, he saw something horrifying. A face in the glass. Not a reflection, an expression pressed outward from within. Mouth open in a scream you can't hear. He stopped speaking the next day. In the days after the fourth bell was confirmed to have resonated beneath the Radcliffe camera, new figures began appearing. 7, clothed in robes of red and ash grey, faces veiled, always seen at the very edge of vision, rarely full in frame. They did not speak. They did not move quickly, but their hum was unmistakable. A note so low it passed through the lungs like a cold hand. Students began losing time, waking in libraries they hadn't entered. One girl wrote 47 pages of Latin she didn't understand. Another attempted to remove her own tongue, whispering, "I was singing what wasn't mine." This was the rise of the choir of glass. A fifth-year D.Phil candidate named Rowan Ellett, known for her skepticism, discovered an anonymous grimoire stitched into the spine of a gutted 17th century prayer book. Inside, diagrams of human vocal cords crossed with bell mechanisms and rituals called throat forgeries. One section was marked in dried blood. To resonate without metal, the body must become the bell. Rowan found this ridiculous, until he began coughing shards, until he looked into a mirror and saw his mouth ringing, not with sound, but with a dull vibration, making the glass around him quiver. His final act was attempting to speak into the walls of the Sheldonian Theatre. No one knows what he said, but the next night, the fifth bell tolled. Somewhere beneath Oxford lies a chamber few have seen and fewer recall. The entrance is lost. Some say it's under Queen's Lane, where the echo never quite returns right. Others claim it appears only at certain times, 3:33 a.m. on nights when the moon is black and the air smells like frost. What's agreed upon is what it contains. 7 mirrors, placed like choir stalls, each one cracked, but never broken, reflections that do not copy you, but observe you, waiting for your eyes to drift. And in the 7th mirror, if you look long enough, you'll see the Bellkeeper, but in your form, wearing your clothes, standing just a little too still, waiting for you to blink. The choir's presence deepens. Their humming enters recordings, fire alarms, phone lines. A mathematics professor at Keble cracked a chalkboard with a scream no one heard, but everyone felt. Windows no longer reflect clearly. You see more than you should. Rooms that aren't behind you. Figures that shouldn't be there. Mouths moving in silence. Lips forming one phrase. Let us ring you. When the 6th bell tolled, there was no sound. Only a ripple across the air, and every mirror in Oxford fogging at once from the inside. One bell sleeps, one, and it is buried not beneath a college, but beneath the city itself. Somewhere below the high street, in the catacombs sealed before the conquest. A place so old, no map remembers it. A silence so deep even sound drowns in it. They say the final bell is not made of metal. They say it is alive. And when it tolls, not even time will echo back. ... 7 keepers. One world rewritten in sound. When the last bell tolls, Oxford will forget it was ever silent. To be continued. It is said that every haunting is just memory trying to return. But memory, true memory, doesn't come as words or thoughts. It comes as sound, a note that doesn't stop. A bell that once rung keeps ringing forever, just beneath silence. And now, in the shadowed bones of Oxford, that last bell begins to wake. They say no map shows it. Not the sub-cellars, not the tunnels beneath the old observatory, not the passage sealed under High Street, where cold air rises even in summer and your voice dies 3 words in. But it's there, the stone well gate, a mouth in the earth, older than Latin, older than bells. Naomi Verity left instructions in her final written note. 7 must unhear what was sung. The last bell is not buried, it is listening. When the 6th bell tolled, Oxford held its breath. The sky greyed, the swans left the river. Every clock paused at 3:33 a.m., then rewound 1 minute. But then the city went still, not quiet, empty. People moved, but slowly. Speech slowed. Birds flew, but didn't sing. A lecturer at St. Peter's gave a full hour-long lecture without ever opening his mouth. One student described a moment like this. It was as if sound was holding its breath, not lost, watching. And then came the final hum, not from the air, from inside. They found it, somehow. Or maybe it found them. A group of 7, drawn together not by logic, but by resonance. The same dream, the same word written backward in condensation, the same melody they hummed without realizing. They descended beneath the city with candlelight and fear. What they found was not a bell in the traditional sense. It was a shape carved into living stone, pulsing, breathing, waiting, not hung, but nested, like an egg, covered in spiraling script no human eye could translate, but every eye began to weep upon seeing. And in the center, suspended not by chains but sound itself, was Thomas Averill. He did not speak, but they heard him. We were never the keepers. We were the notes. You are not ringing the bell. The bell is ringing you. This is not a sound. It is the memory of a scream from before the first word. One of them collapsed. Another vanished the moment she looked into the bell's hollow. Her shoes remained. Her name did not. And then the last bell tolled. There was no impact, no wave, no blinding flash, just a single, perfect moment where all of Oxford, every room, every clock tower, every library, every chapel, every thought aligned. A single harmonic. The choir of glass shattered. Mirrors collapsed into sand. Time hesitated, and for the briefest breath of Nan's silence, the city remembered what it had buried, a knowledge too pure to speak, a sound so true it undid language, a bell that woke the world, and then was forgotten to save it. Until now, there are no records of what happened next. The 7 who entered were never seen again, except one, briefly, seen by a porter near the old divinity school, standing barefoot in the snow, eyes blank, humming a lullaby no one knows. Oxford continues. Lectures resume. Clocks tick on, but there are changes. Certain rooms no longer echo. Some voices never record. One student, born after the tolling, speaks a language no one taught her, but she cries whenever she hears bells. And in the Radcliffe camera, on quiet days, if you sit very still, You may hear something low and slow from beneath the floor, a heartbeat made of stone, a breath, a sound trying very hard not to be heard.